All right, welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I step out from the library and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, greetings, listeners. It is early November, and I thought I would share with you a little bit of my October movie watching. You'll remember last year around this time, I did an episode called Horror Movie Roundup, and that's what I'm doing again this month. So in October, as you know, it's spooky season, and I have, for the last couple of years, participated in a thing called the slashing movie list. I don't know. It's called Slashing 9 this year because it's the 9th year they're doing it. I think I did 7 and 8 and then 9. And what it is a challenge on Board Game Geek where people log horror movies they watch. In this case, they try to watch 31 horror movies in 31 days in October. And while that is really fun, I generally don't have time for that in the 31 days of October. So what I do instead is when that list gets posted, somewhere around September 15th, I start preloading. This year I called it the Blood Bank because one of the themes was vampire movies. I start preloading horror movies in September that I can use as fill-ins for if I miss a day in October, then I can fill in one of those. And the goal would be to have enough preloads in September that I can mark one for 31 days of October. It's sort of like in my top of the stack. I say I pick 4 games and try to play 3 of them. In the Slashing 9 thing, I try to watch 31 movies in 45 days. And I do make clear on the site which movies I'm watching when. So any day where I fill in a movie that I watched previously, I put it with an asterisk and say the date I actually watched it, just to kind of keep track of that. So, but in this list, I won't be sharing which ones I watched in September or which ones I watched in September just out of time's sake. So I've already eaten up like 3 minutes of my walk, maybe more, telling you what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to talk about the horror movies. I'm going to go through them in order, the 31 that I logged for October, and I will stop and comment on ones that I think are worthy of comment. Otherwise, you just get to hear the movies I watched. I started off with a banger. This is Hell House LLC on October 1st. Hell House LLC is a movie I've heard about a number of times. It was on my list last year and I didn't get to it. I think it wasn't available on streaming. It is found footage, which is a genre I generally really enjoy, and it's great. Oh, wow. It is really good. Maybe the best movie I watched this year, or second best of the horror movies I watched. It is about a group of people building a haunted house in an abandoned hotel, which turns out to itself be haunted, and bad stuff happened. It does the best things that found footage movies do, which is, they restrict where you can see things, and then they put stuff in the background that the characters who are on screen or filming don't notice, but as the audience we notice, and it's extra creepy because the characters don't. Really good, strong film. Hell House LLC starts off with a banger. One of the other things they suggested on the challenge was to try to watch technology movies. So I picked out 2 right away to start. I watched The Signal from 2007 and The Signal from 2014. These are not remakes. They just have the same title. The Signal from 2007 is your standard, I say standard just because I've encountered it a number of times. Stephen King's Cell has a very similar idea. The end of the TV show The Dollhouse, or the sort of futuristic glimpse of what happens in the TV show The Dollhouse, has this idea. But the idea is that there's a signal coming through media that drives us crazy and turns us into murderers or whatever. The way people act in this movie reminds me the most of the Crazies. They sort of go nuts and kill people, but it's not like zombies where they're just constantly murdering. Instead, they think they're doing the right thing. That's The Signal. Then The Signal 2014 is a totally different thing. Involves a couple people having really weird experiences and trying to figure out what's going on with where they are. And it started with them following a signal into the desert, and then something happens. And from there, they're just trying to figure out what's going on. I don't want to say too much because it's a thriller mystery, and so the more you reveal, the less good it is, but it was pretty entertaining, and I recommend if you like a sort of techno thriller with Lawrence Fishburne in it. I like Lawrence Fishburne. Next up, October 4th was The Pope's Exorcist. I watched this on Netflix. Russell Crowe being the titular Pope's Exorcist. It was fine. I find demonic possession movies entertaining and kind of enthralling, in part because I know people really believe in that, and I confess I don't. And so the overlap between the two makes for interesting storytelling, in my opinion. Russell Crowe played that with his usual amount of panache. For October 5th, I counted the final 3 episodes of last year's Cabinet of Curiosities series, which I watched. The rules for this say that you can watch TV shows and count them, but you need to count it. Like 2 hours of a show counts as one movie. So I watched 3 45-minute episodes and called that 1 day's worth. I think my favorite one, Dreams of the Witch House, was pretty good, but the other 2 were good also. So that's Cabinet of Curiosities episodes 6, 7, and 8. On October 6th, I watched Dracula Dead and Loving It, the Mel Brooks movie. It was garbage. October 7th, I watched Bones and All. That was a really interesting movie about characters who are cannibals. And the idea that if you're a cannibal, you have a sort of irresistible need to be a cannibal. And what happens? It's sort of a quiet, meditative movie, despite being about cannibals. I like it. October 8th, I watched Meg 2, The Trench. Not a good movie. Not even kind of fun the way the first one was. Just kind of boring. And then sharks eating people. So yeah, I didn't really like that one. October 9th, Troll Hunter. This was a found footage movie that barely crosses into the realm of horror. It would only be horror because of the subject matter, not because of the movie doesn't have very much intense, horrific moments. It has a couple action-packed scenes, but I don't think action by itself makes it horror. But it's essentially about a group of college students who they hear about a wild bear that's been attacking people, so they go to document it, and they discover a guy whose job is he's being employed by the Swedish government to fight trolls and hide the fact that trolls exist. So, pretty good. I liked it. Next up, we have Near Dark. Oh, this was great. Vampire movie about a vampire biker gang, or vampire ne'er-do-wells who go around killing people, but they're kind of a biker gang family. One could suggest that you see hints of Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses in this movie, or his Devil's Rejects. You know, you have these characters who do horrific things but are kind of a family to one another, and we follow their exploits. These movies are a little more coherent and a little less weird than the Rob Zombie movies, but pretty good, and includes a lot of the people who are in Aliens, which is kind of fun. Directed by Catherine Bigelow. Special shout out to Bill Paxton, who has a really great role in that one. That's Near Dark. I'm a third of the way through the list, and I'm most of the way home. So I watched Event Horizon. This is not the first time I'd seen that movie. I liked it quite a bit. I'd been reminded of it a number of times because the basic premise, which is traveling faster than light, exposes you to otherworldly entities which then try to take over your ship, kind of demonic, is kind of the same premise as the faster than light travel in the world of Warhammer 40,000. The idea is that the way that humankind travels from place to place is through the warp, which is actually like a hell dimension. There's demons constantly trying to get into your ship when you're traveling by that method. So this is sort of the very early days of human beings discovering that problem. I thought it was pretty fun. I've heard a number of people talk about this movie as being really scary, and I didn't think it was, but I enjoyed it. Event Horizon. I saw The Nun 2. I think that was one of my September viewings, actually. The Nun 2 is the sequel to The Nun, which is itself a spin-off from The Conjuring 2, featuring a demon that looks like a nun and kind of bothers the Elaine Warren, or Helen Warren, or whatever her name is, the Warren lady. In the original Nun, it goes back in time to when that demon was sort of discovered, and then the second one follows that demon in its next part of its journey through, I don't know, our world, causing trouble. I thought the first Nun movie was a series of sort of jump scare set pieces with this creepy nun character and a very thin plot. And what they did for the second movie is they made the plot thinner. Really not great, but some fun set pieces, and I like the way the nun looks. So that's nice and creepy. October 13th and 14th, I gave into my habit of like clearing out chains of movies or series of movies, and I watched the Hell House LLC 2, The Abaddon Hotel, and Hell House LLC 3, Lake of Fire. In each of these movies, because the original Hell House was a found footage film, as I said, But it was a found footage film in the form of a documentary. It's a documentary being made about these people who did this thing, and then the documentarians found all this footage that the people in the house shot. And so the second one expands on that to be a talk show about the documentary crew and all the weird stuff that's happened since then at Hell House. And then the third movie is a further documentary about the TV people who made the second documentary, etc., etc. It becomes this sort of Russian doll of found footage. And I thought both of them were fine. I liked the third one a little better than the second one, but they both fall right in the middle of like enjoyable and watchable. They're not bad, not amazing either. And honestly, they all kind of run together in my head now. So I'm not sure 3 out of 5 is the right rating, if not 2 out of 5. But I enjoyed them while I was watching them. I didn't find them particularly scary. They're all kind of the same scares over again. But the people who make it generally are good at making really creepy stuff, and I'm happy to see what they did. I know that they have another one coming out that's sort of the origins of some of the stuff from the Hell House, but in a different place. I'm gonna watch it at some point. That sounds fun. Anyway, that's October 13th and 14th. October 15th, I watched a movie I've heard about for a while but never really seen. It's an anthology movie called V/H/S. It was okay. I gave it the same rating as the Hell House 2 and 3, which is 3 out of 5, because it was fine. There were some genuinely spooky moments. It also was really of its time and problematic in some ways. You know, that it used to kind of be pretty standard in a horror movie that there would be topless women at some point. And it feels like the people making V/H/S thought like, oh, you know what? We definitely need to bring that trend back. So there's a fair amount of kind of unnecessary nudity in the movie, as well as one pretty early in the movie, kind of very disturbing nudity sequence that made me really hate the main characters, which I think is the point. We're not supposed to like them, but I don't know that we're actually supposed to root against them either, but I was. So anyway, that's V/H/S. I know they made a bunch of sequels to that. I don't think I'm probably going to watch them. Mark this point, because later I'll probably watch them anyway. October 16th, I watched Censor. This is the one that I probably would point to as the best horror movie I watched in October. Really, really good. This is a movie about a woman who works for the British censorship office in the 1980s, censoring video nasties, which is what British people call like horror, really exploitative horror movies from that era. It is a psychological horror film with a significant level of sort of giallo type scares, and I really, really liked it. That's Censor, Censor, like person who censors movies. On October 17th, I watched Scream 6, which is the one that takes place in New York. It was fun. I mean, you know, the Scream movies are all kind of the same. They hit a rhythm where they're not bad. I thought it was fun. October 18th is one of the things you have to do, or they encourage you to do in this challenge, is to spin the Sloulette wheel, which is a sort of randomized list of something like 20,000 horror movies. And the one that you get is the one you're supposed to watch. The first one I got, I could not get a hold of it anywhere. It's not streaming anywhere. It's not on YouTube. And as far as I could find, I couldn't get a copy of it even from like my library. I think I could have bought it on Amazon for $50, but that's a lot for a movie that's not rated well. So instead, I decided to go with, I spun it again and I got The Pit from 1981, and boy am I glad I did. This was a wild, really weird movie. Not particularly scary, although there's some parts that are super creepy, but it oscillates madly between like child stalker to supernatural thriller to demon-possessed teddy bear to hole in the ground with prehistoric carnivores to police thriller to sort of horror comedy and back. Like, it's all over the place. Really messy movie, but fun. Not a great movie. I'd probably give it two stars. Like, just as a narrative, it was not as enjoyable as something like, I don't know, any of the movies I've been saying were fine. It was pretty bad from that perspective. But so much weird stuff happens in it that it's worth checking out if you think you'd like a weird movie. So that's The Pit from 1981. On October 19th, I watched Bodies, 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 which was a great kind of slasher thriller movie set in the sort of the world of social media and influencers. It was pretty entertaining. Hello. October 20th, I watched Afflicted, which is another found fiction horror movie that sort of imagines like what would a vampire disease look like if you got it today. and it had some of the qualities of vampirism, but it was sort of a realistic look at it. Really good. I like that a lot. Definitely worth checking out, especially if you like found footage movies. On the 21st, I bought a vampire motorcycle, which I'd heard about from a lady on TikTok, and boy, it did not disappoint. It's a wild movie, really strange. It takes place in the mid 80s in Britain, and so everything's just a little weird for the American view, but also then there's a demon-possessed vampire that drinks blood. Motorcycle. A demon-possessed vampire motorcycle. Can't be out in the sun, kills people and drinks their blood. It's a weird, weird movie. Very strange, very worth checking out. But again, I mean, honestly, a little more competently made than The Pit, but equally weird and bad. On the 22nd, we watched Totally Killer, which is a relatively soft, in terms of the sort of jump scares and gore. It's a relatively soft horror slasher movie, built around the idea of a time traveler who goes back in time to try to stop a slasher killer. It has some parallels and connections to the movie Back to the Future in interesting ways. And the best part of the movie is sort of having a Gen Z youth among high schoolers in the 80s and having them sort of recognize all of the sort of terrible aspects of high school in the 80s. That was a delight. On October 23rd, I watched Slaughterhouse, which was not good. The premise is somebody adopts a sloth and it turns out to be a vicious killer. Really dumb parts, kind of fun parts. If you're gonna watch a really dumb horror movie, I would recommend Slacks instead, which is about a murderous pair of jeans. Those are better than Slaughterhouse. Hellbender was an indie film about a young woman who learns that she's a witch and comes to discover all the powers that go with it. It was fine. It didn't really do a lot for me. I mean, it was made on a shoestring budget and it did a lot with the budget it had, but I didn't really like it. On October 25th, I rewatched Trick or Treat. This is a movie I saw a long time ago. It's an anthology story and pretty good. It holds up pretty well. Not quite the exploitation fest that V/H/S was, and pretty fun. So Trick or Treat, that's trick and then the letter R and then treat. We watched the movie Goosebumps, which is based on the old series of books starring Jack Black. It's a family horror movie. It was cute. My wife felt like watching it and I liked watching it with her. I had seen it before. On October 27th, I watched 9 Miles Down. This was the Slaying 9 series, and so we were encouraged to watch movies that have the 9 in the title. 9 Miles Down is about a place where they're digging an oil well and they find a huge cavern under the ground, and it seems like it's maybe hell, and that's scary. That was fine. Actually, I thought it was less than fine. I gave it 2 out of 5, so not actually very good. On October 28th, I watched No One Gets Out Alive, which was pretty good. It is a pretty heavy-handed allegory for the way that capitalism chews up immigrants and undocumented folks at the whims of capital, but really intense, some really intense sequences, nice, scary stuff, good special effects, well worth a look if you get a chance. That no one gets out alive. October 29th, I fell into a little bit of a rabbit hole at the end of October and I watched all of the Saw movies that I hadn't seen yet. So I started with Saw 3 on October 29th. Then I banked for later use Saws 4, 5, and 6. Then I watched on October, I was just doing stuff, that didn't take a lot of concentration, so I just had those on while I was doing that. And then Saw 7, the final chapter, I watched on October 30th. Since then, I will admit I've watched Saw 8 and Saw 9, so Saw 7 wasn't the final chapter. It was the last one called Saw, though, although Saw 8 was called Jigsaw, and Saw 9 was called Spiral from the Book of Saw, is the title. And then it looks like 10, they just went to Saw 10. So they realized, like, yeah, people just are happy to keep calling it Saw. I thought Saw 3 was pretty good, and 7 is pretty good. 4 and 5 were mediocre. Essentially, Saw is like professional wrestling in that there are these spectacles which stop the narrative and show us a visual treat. In this case, people being like murdered in unusual ways. And then they tell some story, and then they stop and have another visual treat. So in that way, it's sort of like a soap opera or a professional wrestling match. And then finally, on Halloween, my family watched Werewolves Within, which is a sort of horror comedy starring the guy. He was on Veep for a bit. You've definitely seen him before. I can't remember his name though. And the lady who was in the AT&T mobile commercials is what I know her best from. and a bunch of other people who you haven't seen before but are pretty good actors. It's a sort of light horror comedy with a fair amount of tension. Nothing too intense, but pretty entertaining. That's Werewolves Within, the final one that I watched. I also did not get to acknowledge, but I did watch Kronos, Midnight Mass, Fear.com, We Have a Ghost, and then the other 3 Saw movies that I mentioned. The only one I started to watch and put down was Skinamarink. The movie, it's got a little bit of an art house vibe to it, and it's not easy to watch, so you have to be in the right mood. And I wasn't in the right mood when it was time to watch it, so I turned it off. Well, that's it for my October horror movie watching. What have you watched? What did you watch in October? What horror movies? What scary stuff have you been watching? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and share your experiences in the comments. I'd love to hear what movies you've enjoyed and what movies I should check out for next year. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.